Welcome to Two Way Tonight. I'm Mark Halperin reporting to you live from Gotham City, where I can confirm two things. It's hot as Dickens here, and we have a mayor's race going on, voting taking place over the next several hours. And I'll remind you, not only are we not going to have the results today, we're not going to have the results for more than a week because of ranked choice voting, and they have to wait for all the ballots to come in before they can start doing the elimination rounds. But whoever wins the nomination will be challenged by two or three candidates, or maybe four, in the general election. So we are not tonight going to know who the Democratic nominee is going to be for mayor. Historically, that typically, although there have been exceptions, is tantamount to winning the mayoralty, but we will not know that tonight. Tonight, here, what we do know is we've got two great guests. We're going to talk about Iran and what's gone on today. No major developments, but some pretty interesting developments regarding what we know about the U.S. mission's capacity to eliminate the Iranian nuclear program. So we'll talk about that with Behnam Ben Taleblu, who's been here before, a great Iran expert at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and then former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, who's run successfully for the office at hand tonight, will join us later in the program. And I will bring you up to date with all the news. Grateful to you for being here. Reminder that at 7:30 tonight, Eastern Time, second episode of Cancer Decoded will be on, and Stephen A. Smith will be our guest. And then don't forget also Meghan McCain's interview with the Second Lady, Usha Vance, is on tomorrow night. So all that coming up here, but first a word from our new sponsor, Indeed. All of you who hire know that hiring quickly is more important than just about anything else you do in your job. And when it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed's sponsored job helps you stand out in the marketplace and hire people fast. With sponsored jobs, you post your job and it jumps to the top of the page for all the relevant candidates to be reached faster. It makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs post directly to the site have 45% more applicants than the non-sponsored jobs do. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed your hiring right now with Indeed. Listeners of this program get a $75 sponsored job credit. So get your job listings more visibility on go to Indeed.com/two-way to get your $75 sponsored credit. Again, go to Indeed.com/two-way right now. Great way to support our program. All of you who do that, they'll know that we have reached you. Indeed.com/two-way. Terms and conditions apply. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, let's go to the news now. This is important. Probably the signature development of the day is first CNN and then just about everybody reporting that this is number three, please, that the intelligence assessment, the initial intelligence assessment of the U.S. says that the U.S. did not significantly destroy, as President Trump and others in the administration have suggested, the nuclear sites. Now, a few caveats on here. And a reminder, of course, if you're watching on the two-way platform, please raise your hand if you want in on the conversation. And if you're watching on other platforms, don't raise your hand and don't put smack in the chat. Peace, love, and understanding. No time better than now. This is the U.S. intelligence agencies. There are many of them. They make different assessments. Whoever wanted this out has made themselves available to every news organization in the country. So CNN broke it, so they say exclusive, but New York Times, number two, the Associated Press, pretty much everybody is now reporting. So there are people in the intelligence community who want you to know that President Trump's position is at best misleading, that it set the program back only a few months. And that's, of course, much different than decimation. Now, what's significant here? I think three things to watch. One is, do the Israelis, even though they're no longer allowed to bomb because the ceasefire, are the Israelis still with Mossad and other assets helping to further destroy and set back the program? Number two is there going to be negotiations now? Many analysts believe Iran's on its back foot and that the president and Israel and others in part of the talks could drive a harder bargain and perhaps get the kind of inspections that would eliminate or really set back the program more significantly than this initial report. And then finally, how stable and solid is the Iranian government? Could there be regime change? Now, there are lots of intelligence agencies and others may differ. The White House has pushed back hard. And said, no, these leaks are inaccurate, and that in fact, the president's initial characterization was correct. Here's the president on Air Force One, number 7, please.
Tell you, the last thing on their minds is nuclear weapons. They don't even want to think about nuclear. And our B-2 pilots made this all possible. They had a magnificent hit in the dark of night with no moon, no light, no nothing. They hit the target perfectly, wiped it out. And the press is very disrespectful. I saw CNN fake news going, well, maybe it wasn't a perfect hit, it was perfect. They said maybe it did destroy it. We agree it did destroy it, but maybe it could have destroyed it more. No, it couldn't have destroyed it more. Everyone hit. And it's very disrespectful to those great geniuses and patriots that flew those planes through tremendous danger. So CNN and MSDNC are a disgrace. And so are the others. I mean, they're pretty much all a disgrace.
So Caroline Levitt, singing from the same hymnal as her boss, number 8, please, on social media, tweeted this. The report, the CNN story, breaking the news that one intelligence agency says it only said around back a few months. This story was written by the same, quote, reporter who wrote the very first fake news story claiming the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation. How did that work out for you? Again, it's now been matched by many others. It doesn't mean it's true. I think people who don't like President Trump or people who are familiar with President Trump's tendency to exaggerate and sometimes not tell the truth might say, well, of course, this report is true. And maybe it is. I'd be curious to know what the Israelis say, where the Israelis have made it clear that they're not going to stop until they've succeeded. I'll be curious to know if there are going to be talks. If there aren't talks and other intelligence agencies, including the Israelis or the Brits, say, no, it only said it back a few months, better than nothing, but obviously not consistent with what the president has said. Here's the president, a little bit more from the president, talking about Iran and nuclear capacity. Number 6, please.
Did Iran make any commitments yesterday about uranium enrichment?
About what?
About uranium enrichment.
They're not going to have enrichment, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and they know that. They're going to get on to being a great trading nation. You know, they're very good traders. And they're going to be a great trading nation, and they have a lot of oil. They're going to do well. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
So did they
The
promise?
last thing on Iran's mind right now is nuclear weapons.
Okay. Now the president is landed in the Netherlands. Number 12, please. He's or number 11, please. He's going to a dinner with the King and Queen of the Netherlands. Arrived there after the flight from Andrews. Number 11, and then number 12, please. And obviously, the reporters at NATO are going to be eager to ask the president about this, and the president meets with world leaders. This will be a huge topic, probably more front and center than even Ukraine for some of the folks there. And we'll see what he says. The politics of this. The president has been criticized by Democrats for not engaging in enough consultation. Let's go to the next video, although this is pretty compelling. Here he is with the King and Queen. Noah, what color is the Queen wearing there? Is that mustard? What is that? Canary?
Greenish mustard.
Okay. I'm not familiar with this pair, this royal pair. Handsome pair. Gatorade color. All right. In any event, this morning, the thing that the Democrats were on was that the president hadn't consulted with Congress, which, again, presidents unfortunately don't do. And as you know, AOC, amongst others, has called for the president to be impeached. Here's the president on Truth Social. This is number 10, please. Slamming the gentlelady from Brooklyn and the Bronx and saying she's one of the dumbest people in Congress, now calling for my impeachment, despite the fact that Democrats have done that twice. The reason for her rantings is all the victories that the U.S. has under the Trump administration. The Democrats aren't used to winning. Next screen, please. He attacks some other members of Congress, talks about Joe Biden in the auto pen. Next screen, please. And says, Chuck Schumer, whose career is definitely on very thin ice. She and the Democratic friends have just hit the lowest poll numbers in congressional history. So go ahead and try impeaching me again. Make my day. A lot of Democrats now are going to be raising this issue of whether it was worth it because of the reports that it only set the program back a little bit. We're not going to solve that tonight, but we'll talk about that in a minute with our guests. Here's a tweet from Dean Phillips, this is number 14. You'll recall the Minnesota congressman was the only person to challenge Joe Biden for the nomination besides Bobby Kennedy, who left the party. And Dean Phillips says this: Democrats wishing to lose the 26 midterms should promote a 33-year-old socialist devoid of executive experience for mayor of America's largest city and impeach a president who ended a tyrannical regime's nuclear threat while achieving a ceasefire days later. Again, Dean Phillips' tweet, very popular with certain people in my circle. I was probably sent it by 40 different people. But he says eliminate. And of course, now other Democrats, at least, will be bringing up the question of whether it was eliminated. I'll say again, let's see what the other intelligence agencies say. They don't always agree. All right. Again, if you want to be in on the conversation, please raise your hand. Just looking now to make sure I'm not missing any interesting things I need to tell you here. The color is puce. Puce, is that how you pronounce that? Puce? Puce. Puce. I'm told Lori says the dress is puce, and I believe her because I'm not saying I'm color blind, but I don't know much about colors. All right, we're going to talk about Iran and the U.S. and Israel in just a moment with our guest and your questions. And then, as I said a little later in the program, we will be joined by the Honorable Bill de Blasio, former mayor of New York City, and we'll talk a little bit about the election there. But now, let me tell you a little bit about a word from our other sponsor of this program, Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth makes products that if you're somewhere like I am tonight, New York City, you're going to want to own. Cozy Earth products are made from viscose from bamboo. They naturally wick away moisture and heat from your body, and particularly at nighttime, that is a welcome thing because it is hot here in New York and a lot of America. You have the Cozy Earth bamboo sheets, very comfortable, the all-day tea, and their Studio Paint collection, all made the same way and all intended to allow you to stay cool when it's warm. You can buy their bedding stuff risk-free, 100-night sleep trial, and use them now for 100 days. And if you don't like them, you can send them back without any fuss. But you'll probably want to keep them. And if you do, they come with a 10-year warranty on the bedding products. That's a decade of cool, quality, and comfortable sleep. So upgrade all your stuff now, your bedding and your clothes, to Cozy Earth gear. Go to cozyearth.com. Use the code TWOWAY, 40% off. 40% off. Can't beat that. Best-selling temperature-regulating sheets, apparel, and more. Trust me, you'll feel the difference with the sheets from the very first night. Cozy Earth, sleep cooler, lounge lighter, and stay cozy. We thank our sponsors for making the program possible. And thank you as we bring in our first guest. Sam or somebody will bring him in. Grateful to have him back here, who was here the other night. Behnam Ben Taleblu, an Iran expert at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome back, sir. Glad to have you back.
Great to be back with you.
Let's talk, let's leave the intelligence assessment aside for a minute and just say, some people believe Iran's really on their back foot now, and regardless of how much was degraded, that they're going to have to negotiate and agree to inspections. How do you see that issue of possible negotiations?
Well, it's a great question because the theme of negotiations is yet to be said. Are they negotiating over a different regional security posture? Are they negotiating over how to guarantee regime survival? Or are they negotiating over how best to keep what's left of their nuclear question?
Hold on, I'm stopping you because you framed it perfectly. Repeat the litany again because it's right on point, and I've not seen it anywhere else as clearly laid out. So I hate to ask you to do a rerun, but say the litany of three again, please.
Of course. So it really depends over what you're negotiating over. Forgive me if I missed any from before, but is it negotiating over how to ensure regime survival? Is it negotiating over what's left of their nuclear program? Or is it negotiating over a potentially new regional posture involving Iran? They all are intertwined here because US military action and an Israeli military action, which came under the umbrella of trying to stop a potentially nuclear armed Islamic Republic of Iran, also touched those other elements about the regime's potential different regional posture, its apparatus of foreign aggression and domestic suppression, and even threatened by highlighting how weak it is, its hold on power. So those are all valid questions to ask.
Yep, absolutely. Brilliantly said. Now, here's a question that I've been wondering about, and I'm glad you're back because I didn't ask you last time. Iran, it's been widely reported in the Western media and in Israel, warned the U.S. and Qatar that they were going to bomb shoot missiles at these bases. So I mean, it was all kabuki. They said, get ready, here it comes, here's where it's coming. They've lost, regardless of how much the nuclear program has been degraded, they've lost a number of their top military officials, scientific officials. They've lost control of their airspace. People say that this is, in the normal course thing, this would be humiliating. Do people in Iran know this? Do they have access to this media? Do they know that their country is lost or not?
Well, increasingly, the country has been subject to a whole series of rolling and then sometimes national internet restrictions or internet blackouts. Like us, for example, trying to look inward, looking at Iranian websites, looking at websites that have .ir domains, for example, have not been able to, for a significant portion of this conflict, been able to access those websites. And we're on the outside. So imagine the more tightly controlled flow of information on the inside. The escape hatch to that is the virtual private networks or the VPNs that allow Iranians to connect to the outside world, and of course the significant Iranian usage of social media platforms like Telegram and Instagram, for example, where they can communicate with one another and share information. If you are, though, I'm just saying on balance, if you are a citizen, a resident living in the Islamic Republic of Iran, your basic run-of-the-mill average Iranian, even though that's not a monolith, a country of 90 plus million people, you already know how incompetent your government is, and you already know that they don't represent your views, values, and interests. So, when they see their regime, failing consistently in the military fight against Israel, they get angry, not just because it's the leadership of the Islamic Republic has brought a conventional war onto Iranian territory for the first time since the end of the Iran-Iraq War in 1988, and they blame them for the bad leadership, but they also blame them for the poor resource allocation. The Israeli strikes and the American strikes did away with two words that exist both in Persian and in Arabic that basically translate to awe. They did away with the awe of the regime because they showed how weak the regime was. The regime put all of its money and all of its prestige into these drones and missiles and nuclear program. And then here comes Israel, which the Iranian government calls the little Satan. And here comes America, which the Iranian government calls the great Satan. And they basically neuter or handicap or decapitate. These are all not technical words. These are political words.
Right.
They take away these capabilities, or they show how further away powers with different capabilities actually significantly overperform. If there's one lesson here, it's that the Iranian people also now see that even on the military and asymmetric side, that this is a tier 3 type of government. So it creates that expectation gap between the kind of government they deserve versus the kind of government they have, and the places that the regime has been spending on and what they have to show for it. So it intensifies a train of thought, a school of thought that already exists in Iranian society, which is this government isn't worth its salt.
Okay. I'm going to get to your questions in a minute. So again, if you want in on the conversation, please raise your hand. So where would we look for that? If we saw hundreds of thousands of people in the streets and that was reported, we'd know that. If you're looking for people in the government or the public at large in Iran to say, okay, we tried to be a great power by building a nuclear capability. We've got all these sanctions. We've now been bombed and attacked. And the U.S. president wants us to come to the table. Where would we be picking up the possibility that either government officials or the people would say, let's trade the effort to build nuclear capability for integration into the world order?
Well, that latter part we have to disaggregate, because integration into the world order, regardless of your view, your disposition on is the regime good or bad inside of Iran, lots of Iranians desire better life, and that better life they see through the prism of integration. This isn't the 1980s or 90s where they're puritanical about it, but this is the debate in the population. So largely within the population, and we're saying this anecdotally based on people who have come and gone and acquaintances, as well as most importantly, the nature of the evolving social media debate in Iran, which is just one measure. It's not a perfect measure. These are the things you hear and see. Let me tell you even beforehand, like before we got into this shooting war, how you could tell or what the measure was that the Iranian population saw the ineffectiveness of their military being tied to the larger themes of the ineffectiveness and the incompetence of the Iranian government. You may remember the first kind of open Israel-Iran exchange was in April 2024. Then the Iranians had sent a bunch of drones. Do you guys remember that those drones took like 9 hours or 7 hours to reach their destination, and ultimately every single drone was shot down before entering Israeli airspace? You remember that?
Yes, sir.
And then that was in April. In the month of May, you may remember that the Iranian president, Ibrahim Raisi, his helicopter crashed in northwestern Iran. They said it was cloud cover. Some people thought it was a foreign sabotage. Some people thought it was domestic sabotage. What have you? The Iranian president's helicopter crashed, and it took about 9-10 hours to have official confirmation from Iran that this guy had died and that the helicopter had indeed crashed.
Right.
The Iranian population, again, on these same platforms, were making a consistent reference to a joke. And that joke was the ability of the government to even confirm the news of the death of the president takes as long to reach us as it takes the drones to reach Israel. You know, they're making light of these situations. This is one anecdotal measure, but this is a measure that comes up time and time again in jokes, in memes, in casual conversation that you see represented and really proliferating across the Persian language social media space. I'm not saying, again, this is representative of everything, but it is representative of something.
Okay, one more question, and then again, we're going to go to the community. Within the Iranian government, we talk about the Ayatollah, and we know that others, senior people were killed by Israel. Are there people within senior positions who could urge the Ayatollah to negotiate and give up the program? Are there people who could be in the government who could form the organizational structure for some sort of attempt to overthrow the Ayatollah, or is that doesn't exist?
If they exist in the government, or if they exist in the armed forces, or if they exist in the national security apparatus, they haven't been known, they haven't been named, and they may not be prominent individuals, because at least in their public commentary and in their public disposition, as well as what is leaked about the orientation and views of some of these people, there is no daylight there. There are people within the broader category of regime elites who aren't for fully trading this away, but they offer a different style of engagement with the West, just to win sanctions relief, or just to buy time, or just to facilitate the expansion of the Iranian nuclear program, but in a way that is drastically safer than the way that it's been, kind of expanded under the cover of the international community with two eyes deep on the prize. I want to stress this though, which is the main decision maker still is someone named Ali Khamenei. He's an 86-year-old ideologue who, unfortunately, even from somewhere deep in his bunker in Tehran or Labastan or Mashhad or wherever his bunker was, he played to the edge deep in that bunker. That shows you something. He was still willing, even though, as you mentioned, he gave a heads up, the Iranian government gave a heads up about the missiles coming. He was still willing to fire ballistic missiles, weapons of war that can go across the Persian Gulf in about 6 to 8 minutes with moderately sized warheads at the largest American military installation. And the narrative that he is selling about his resolve or will to fire these things is that I fired missiles at the biggest American military base and America offered us a ceasefire. So even if there are some people on the sidelines who may be saying this in private and we have no idea who they are, these guys, particularly the most important decision makers who set the agenda, they are drinking their own Kool-Aid.
Right.
And they are bringing this great country towards more ruin.
Really interesting. All right, Cody, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for our guests.
Hi there. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So my name is Cody. I'm from Mississauga, Canada. I want to say thank you for this platform because we don't have this in Canada. And I think that it's an indictment of all the media that I come to two-way before my own media. So I want to say thank you for that.
Well, we hope to be in every country in the world before too long, and we'll put Canada high on the list.
I hope so. My question is a NATO question. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so just quickly, I was listening this morning to the morning meeting, and because I have a day job, I have to focus on that. But I have to say, Sean's analogy about NATO, and some people, the analogy that he used was correct. And shockingly, as a Canadian, I know that Trump is right about the NATO spending. And I'm glad that he's pressuring Canada and other countries to spend more on our military, not because it's just in America's interest, but because it's also in ours. So those are my thoughts, but my question is more broad. the president has said that he wants NATO members to pay 5% of their GDP towards NATO. And I just was wondering, is the goal of this trip to get commitments from every country, or what is the deliverable that we often talk about in these foreign trips that the administration has floated?
Great question. Behnam, you want to address that, or would you like me to? All right. Is he frozen, or am I?
He is.
Why
Now
don't
he
you go?
isn't.
Go ahead.
I think there was a freeze.
Yeah, you're back now. Are you in a position to address the NATO question?
Why don't you go first, sir? Because I can only guesstimate. I haven't been following it as closely.
Yeah, understood. So, as you know, this has been a project of the president's for a long time. Chris Coons, who's at the NATO summit, senator from Delaware, was on Morning Joe this morning, and he mentioned that this was, the big focus of NATO. Didn't mention that it's only happening because President Trump made it a priority. President Trump has been badly misunderstood regarding NATO. He wants NATO countries, including Canada, to pay their fair share. He doesn't want to destroy NATO. He wants it fairly funded, and he wants a clear mission. And the mission is not just about restraining the Soviet Union, although obviously now NATO's main focus is dealing with Ukraine, but he wants a clear mission. So your country and Spain are holding out. It's not, as Sean pointed out, and as others have, it's not a pure 5%. It's 3.5 plus 1.5 for other defense-related activities. But for most Americans, and certainly for the president, I would say most Americans, maybe many Americans at least, every dollar counts. And the United States would like to see, and the president would like to see, other countries kicking in more, and not just writing checks, but playing a more robust role. And it's certainly the case that depending on what happens with Russia and Ukraine, we may well see Canadian, British, maybe German, maybe French military assets being deployed to deal with Putin when the United States will not put boots on the ground, although we'll stay involved as part of NATO for sure. So he asked about what the deliverable will be. I confess I've been so focused on Iran, I can't tell you what they plan to announce. But certainly the U.S. expects progress at this meeting towards firming up those commitments and putting specific timelines on them. It's easy to say we'll eventually spend 5%, but is it now? Is it next year? Is it 10 years from now? Behnam, anything you want to add to that, please do.
Just one footnote and a flag. I think your producer may have mentioned I have a hard out at the 6:30.
Yes, sir.
But on NATO, you may remember what the first Secretary General of NATO said long after leaving, which was, why was NATO created? It was created to keep the Russians out, the Germans down, and the Americans in. So in the 21st century, as we're talking about restructuring the funding for NATO, we're going to have to come up with a new cocktail of the rationale, the raison d'etre of what is NATO purpose of it, and how is it going to meet the 21st century North Atlantic threats that we all face.
Yeah, well said. And of course, it's all been thrown into a different direction than it would be because of Russia and Ukraine. Behnam, thank you for joining us. Grateful to have you here, and we hope you'll come back soon.
Anyone else?
Cody, thank you for the question. Thank you for being part of two-way. Okay, let's go to Peter. Peter, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell us where you are. For those who don't know, what's on your mind?
Okay, now you can hear me. Okay, again, I'm from Southern California. I've been on a few times. I'm a retired military. I'm a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, military intelligence. I guess the thing I wanted to point out, Mark, you asked, what are the Israelis saying? I put in the chat, for what it's worth, I got that off Real Clear Politics. The Times of Israel, and I defer to you about how, I don't really know that paper that well.
They're pretty good in my experience.
Okay, well, they say that the Israelis are saying it's not been wiped out, but that it's been set back not months, but years. That's their initial assessment. And I think that's probably a pretty fair one. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Fordor was completely destroyed because it appears that they were using earth movers to bury it. And so I guess the most concerning thing are the reports that enriched uranium may have been smuggled out before the attack, before even the Israeli attacks, and that there's some talk about that there's yet another enrichment site that's even deeper, that has not been hit at all, and that's just came back up on the radar. And so those would be the two things. One, that they have yet another enrichment site that hasn't been hit and is very well within. And then the other one, that maybe maybe a substantial amount of their enriched uranium was smuggled out of the sites before they were hit. I don't know. I would like to ask our guest, what does he think about that? I guess the key thing is they've certainly destroyed the Israelis particularly have destroyed the missile capability and missile production as well. And then it doesn't appear that they have now, at least in the short term, that the Iranians have any sites where they can actually put together a bomb, or more specifically, a warhead to put on a missile.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we don't know. You've raised all the right points. We don't know, and what we don't know also is what they had before, right? There were disagreements before Israel and the U.S. acted about where they stood on processing, where they stood on warheads, where they stood on the entire process, and their determination to actually build one of these. So we don't know. I will say, here's what's not helping for us to know. If you look on social media, X primarily, you'll see a lot of the most aggressive people in the administration and their allies are going after reporters who are reporting on this. They're not challenging the facts, although they're denying the reports, but they're saying, well, this reporter got this story wrong, or here's what this reporter said about the program a little while ago. That's not going to help us get to the facts. That's going to rally the base. It's going to make people who are inclined to believe the president. But for the sake of Israel, for the sake of the world, the sake of the United States security, the sake of the mission and the cause that underlined the action by the president over the weekend, it would be good if they could focus, I think, on the facts rather than on attacking reporters.
Right.
Yeah. Peter, thank you. I'm grateful to you. I want to bring in our other guest for the evening, the Honorable Bill de Blasio, former mayor of New York City, on this august day. Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining. Before we talk about the mayoral race, you ran for president. You presided over a government with $1 billion in Homeland Security budget. So you're and have been a friend of Israel for a long time. How do you view the current discussion about both the proper, whether it was proper for the president to do what he did, and then I never asked two-part questions, but here I go. And how do you feel about the current debate about whether the mission was as effective as the president said it was?
First point, great to be here, by the way, Mark.
Thank you.
I appreciate what you are doing with this community. First point, War Powers Act, what we learned after Vietnam, and I hope we learned after Iraq. There needs to be a congressional discussion. There needs to be a decision. That's what the Constitution says, I believe, and the law says. And it didn't happen here, and it didn't happen during the Obama administration, which I think was one of the times when some of this started to atrophy, with all due respect to Obama. So, no, it can't be a double-edged sword, or a double standard, I should say. It's like you have to have appropriate decision by the legislature before you go to war, period. As to the efficacy, I think, we've seen a lot of reporting before and after that says this would be a slowdown for Iran, but not a shutdown. And that's going to really be, I think, a big question going forward. Was it worth all that? Did it get us enough? What I think is worth it, and I have to say I appreciate Trump's sense of strategy here, is if you're the Iranian leadership now, you have to be scared of your own shadow, both in terms of your own survival, but also all your allies who have, seen themselves degraded. If part of this was to get Iran to stop being negative and expansionist and terroristic, I imagine it's had quite an impact.
If you were a presidential advisor to this president right now, and he asked you what his next steps should be, what would you advise?
I would advise that there's not going to be a regime change in Iran. There's no context. When you look at all the other places where there's been regime change, it's because there's a strong organized movement already engaged. It doesn't exist, unfortunately, in Iran. There is a huge amount of protest and disgust with the regime, but it's not organized. And I would advise no further military action unless you go back to the Congress. But also, I would say I'm not sure we would get much from more military action. I think what's been achievable has probably been achieved from what I can see.
And what about if you were an advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu? What would you advise him?
Probably somewhat similar. I mean, I don't want to say quit while you're ahead, and I have the deepest disagreement with Netanyahu on so many levels. Look, to the extent the idea was to stop the adventurism and terrorism backed by Iran and to slow down their nuclear program, I think he can claim some measure of success. Of course, it begs the question, how did things get so bad on his watch, and how did October 7th happen and many other things? But if we're talking about this specific action, I would argue quit while he's ahead, because there's just too many dominoes that fall if you pursue something like this on an ongoing basis.
All right. I'm not the dictator of this show, but it's difficult to run the show by committee. So here's what we're going to do. Mayor and I will talk a little bit about the mayoral race here, and then we'll take your questions. And you can ask about the mayoral race. You can ask where you can get the best slice on the Midtown, or you can ask about the Middle East and Bill de Blasio.
Controversial topics, all Mark.
Controversial and all subject to great debate, but requiring peace, love, and understanding on every one. Let's talk about the mayoral race. I was quite taken with the tweeting you did on the night of, I think it's the second debate. I'll ask you the question that my former colleague Terry Moran was asked after his controversial post. Were you sober watching the debate?
100%.
100%. What inspired you to go so hard after Andrew Cuomo and on that evening?
Well, I was high on life, if I was high on anything, because, I had been waiting to see people state the obvious and fight back. And in the first debate, I think only Michael Blake did that productively, to his credit. But in the second debate, I think Zohran Mamdani was on a much stronger footing. I think Brad Lander was on fire. And it was a real debate. Also, there's a lot of junkies, political junkies on this call, switching use of junkie here. That second debate actually shed light. It actually brought out real contrast in both personality, leadership, but also issues. And I was ready to say something about Andrew Cuomo, and I had held my fire for a long time because I did not want it to become like a back and forth with Andrew Cuomo and his team.
Yeah.
But I think that night proved to be kind of kismet. It was time for me to say something. It was the right moment in terms of what was happening on that stage. And then I think it's absolutely fascinating. I'm a supporting actor in this drama, but so many people from so many different angles over the last 2 weeks have finally said the emperor has no clothes. And I think it's reverberating out very deeply. And that debate sparked it.
Yeah. Interesting. You want to tell us who your 5 votes were for?
Not tonight, Mark.
Not tonight. Okay. Did you list Andrew Cuomo on your ballot?
Amazingly, I did not.
Did not. Okay. I think that one of the brilliant things that those opposing Andrew Cuomo have done was to popularize the concept of don't list him at all. And if he loses, that'll clearly have been a very marketable way to try to defeat him. I'm wondering what you think of that.
If you look at, I would urge everyone who cares about politics and communication, look at the Dream for NYC video. Really talented people put together. And the DREAM stands for Don't Rank Evil Andrew for Mayor. And it's powerful and really hammers home, if you believe, as so many of us do, there's a thoroughly corrupt, amoral human being. The best thing to do about it is to just don't rank and tell everyone else don't rank. Well, that did gather some steam. I think it really, as ranked choice voting has become more the norm in New York City, people are still kind of learning it. That actually helped people think. And then pivotally, for Zohran and Brad to cross-endorse, which was, as you know, Mark, the criticism in 2021 for anyone who's not happy with the status quo in New York City, people have said, if only Maya Wiley and Catherine Garcia had cross-endorsed, the result would have been different. I think that's a true statement.
Yeah.
People got the memo, and it took guts on both their sides, honestly. They both showed some actual political creativity and courage, but I think when the smoke clears, if the Emerson poll in particular is to be believed, I think it will be possibly the decisive act of this election.
Yeah. So there's, I agree with you. So there's the question of ideology. Do you believe that the city should own grocery stores, or is that too much like socialism? Then there's the question of whether there's stuff in people's background that you don't like. You don't like a lot of stuff about Andrew Cuomo's background. Then there's a question of experience. What 3 jobs did you have before you were mayor of New York that best prepared you to be mayor of New York?
I'm going to answer for me, and then I'm going to answer for someone else that I think will open your eyes.
Okay.
For me, I would say being the regional director for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development,
Right.
ironically working for Andrew Cuomo, so I covered New York State and New Jersey. I would say being Hillary Clinton's campaign manager in the 2000 U.S. Senate race, that fabulous three-ring circus, and being a public advocate and having a citywide office in, covering the whole city and getting to know and advocating for people all over the city. Those
Right.
three.
Okay.
would probably
Okay.
be good examples.
Before you go to your next one, those are the three I thought you'd say, and I would say being Hillary Clinton's campaign manager qualifies somebody to do anything because it's a very complicated. Just dealing with her and her spouse, just because they're very political people and very sophisticated. But that's not necessarily, with the exception of public advocate, the other two aren't necessarily. If you were doing a civics class, you wouldn't say the other two were linear preparation, right?
No.
I mean, right. So now let's talk about Andrew. Andrew was a cabinet secretary. He was the governor of New York, elected and reelected governor of New York. And I'm not sure there's a third one, but I know there needs to be a third one because I think those two are a little bit more linearly connected to doing a very, very tough job. Now, let's talk about not ideology, not character, but Mamdani, who I assume was the other person you were going to tell me the three jobs he's had. Maybe not.
No. I was going to tell you about Ed Koch. He was a Democrat district leader, reformist outsider, and then became a member of Congress where he had a staff of like 10.
Yeah. Okay.
He
Great
turned out
example.
to be a very good manager.
Yeah.
And leader, I would say, until unfortunately his third term. But
and how old was he when he first got elected?
That's a great question. I
somebody Google, put it in the chat.
I'm going to say well into his 40s. But I'm making a point. I think Koch, for a lot of us, even if we didn't agree with him, certainly had his hand on the wheel, and he also knew how to energize New Yorkers around an idea, and obviously how to dominate the media in a good way in terms of getting his message out.
Yeah.
I would just caution. When you look at who's been good and bad at this job and how they've been good or bad, there is literally no preparation that anyone can make sense of that works for this gig. But more to the point, I think in today's politics especially, it is so much about communications. It is so much about expressing a vision and getting people to feel something emotionally that if Zorhan wins, he has a lot to learn, but I don't want to miss the fact he may have the single most important tool.
Right, which is communication. So someone put in the chat, Koch was 53, which sounds about right to me. Again, I live here. I pay taxes here. I have a kid who walks the streets here. I question his level of experience. I leave his ideology aside. I look at what he's done in his life. I look at his age. I look at how hard $1 billion Homeland Security budget. That's a lot. Just managing the Homeland Security of this city. That's a lot. Okay. And dealing with whoever the governor is, as you know, even if you get along with the governor, the mayor-governor relationship, that's a lot. And I just look at his resume. So I'm just wondering, since you speak favorably of him, what gives, besides the fact that he knows how to make a good TikTok video, and I say that without diminishing comms, but I mean, what gives you confidence that he's equipped to do what some call the second toughest job in American government?
I think given I'm not here to stroke anyone, given the sophistication though of this audience, I can shorthand something here. Let's say it's a two-person race in this Democratic primary. We won't know until the votes are counted, but from weeks and weeks, it's appeared to be a two-person race. Okay, the experienced candidate, not to be coy, but was experienced in corruption, experienced in lying, experienced in sending seniors to their death during COVID. A lot of things that we don't want, sexual harassment, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem is when experience aligns with both character and substantive problems. And also, boy, talk about not an inspirational campaign, not a positive vision for the future, no energy. He was really low energy in those debates because I think that's where he's at in life. You got to put all that in the pot and say, okay, of course, we're going to respect Andrew Cuomo's years of experience, but unfortunately, they're kind of corrupted by all these other realities. So now you have this surprisingly less experienced candidate. What do you do? When I got to know Zorhan, I got to know him a little bit when I was still mayor and he went into the assembly, but more recently over the year, over the course of his campaign, watching him, but also talking to him. First of all, he's just really intelligent. That counts for a lot in this work.
Yes, sir.
He listens, which is not a character trait of everyone in elective life, as I'm sure you know. He's thoughtful. He can handle criticism. I've seen ability to make adjustments and learn. I've seen him put some very good people around him. The things that took the kind of careful work, like coming to that alliance with Brad Lander. I've seen a lot of things that say to me a little bit bad analogy, but good analogy. 2008 Obama campaign. What did Obama ever run to be president of the United States? But the campaign gave us confidence that he was a great communicator, great vision, also put great people around him. I've seen a lot of that with Zorhan. Now, that is not to say we know what's going to happen in practice. But I think when I see a base level of sort of values, intelligence, ability to learn, it gives me the confidence someone can figure it out. And by the way, we had very experienced mayors, Koch, Giuliani, Bloomberg, who also turned out to be very divisive.
Yeah.
Explicitly.
Yeah.
And he's not that kind of person in my view. I think as a persona, he is much more multiculturally focused, unifier, et cetera.
We're going to get folks, please raise your hand if you want to talk to the mayor. I want to ask you three more things about him. One of the things you did when you won, even though people said you were too far to the left, some people questioned your experience, not to this degree, but some people did. You appointed a first-class person as your police commissioner.
Thank you.
And you took Homeland Security really seriously. And you spent time on it, and you recognized, like a president does, like keeping the city safe. How do you have the confidence of who he'd put in jobs like that, and that he would have a judgment and spine to protect the city?
I do, based on what I've seen so far. Yes, I think he is practical enough and understands what the responsibility is. Jessica Tisch is our police commissioner now. I think she's outstanding. She served in my administration in a different role. I think she should continue. I think there's going to be a possibility here if Zorhan is the Democratic nominee, or however he might end up being elected. I think he has a possibility to put together an absolutely experienced, strong team. And I think a lot of people will counsel him that way. You're right, Mark. I understood as a progressive, and not you should overcompensate per se, but you damn well better get the basics right. And I'm happy to say, with Bill Bratton's great help, we drove down crime for 6 years. And with other great police leaders, we drove down crime for 6 years before the pandemic. And we got the number of jobs up to a record high. So I think progressives need to be really clear that the price of admission, not just because you're a public servant, but because the standard is even higher, is get those basics of governing right. When I did it on the good days, it served me very well. Some days, bluntly, I took my eye off the ball and I got my ass appropriately kicked for it.
Two things about process, and then again, we're going to go to folks' questions. I get why we're not going to know the results for like 10 days, because in ranked choice voting, every ballot has to come in so you can run the process. And I'm one who's critical of people in the media and in the pundit class for being impatient. And people say, well, we should know on election night who wins. Well, no, we should have an accurate count. But this is too long, and it's not been messaged correctly. I think a lot of people in the city, not professional political people, expect we're going to know who the mayor is. They went to vote today. Well, maybe not tonight, but tomorrow. We're not going to know for a long time. Shouldn't the city do a better job of explaining why we're not going to know, and that we're not going to know?
Yeah, no, that's a primary. Obviously, the general is likely to be a simpler process.
Well, not necessarily. That's my next question. If we have 5 candidates on the ballot.
Okay, fair. We don't know yet, but let me make it this way. I am questioning of ranked choice. I was not 100% thrilled when we did it. There are definite virtues, including it saves money not having runoff, et cetera. But it also is confusing to people. And yes, that delay is an issue. But let's be clear, if we had our runoff system, we would be waiting, to go a few weeks ahead to a runoff. And so none of this stuff is perfect. The decisive action is in November. Bluntly, for us, it's not President of the United States. I think if people have to wait a week to find out who their mayor might be, because it's only a Democratic nominee, who their mayor might be in 2026, I'm not bent out of shape about it. I agree with you on the messaging, though. I think we have to keep educating people. And I would think it would be helpful to say, guys, here's why it actually takes this long. Some of it is waiting for the ballots to come in the mail, because we have made much more of a commitment to mail-in votes in New York State than we used to, thankfully. There are some legitimate reasons. I agree with you. It could be explained better.
Okay. If we have a general election where Mandami is the Democratic nominee and Andrew, who has a ballot line, continues to run, do you think people like Senator Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries will endorse the Democratic nominee, or you think they'll endorse Cuomo, or you think they'll stay out of it? What do you think the establishment will do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think, I mean, obviously it's premature, but I would say I think a big swath of the Democratic establishment and the labor movement would go with the Democratic nominee regardless, including if it's Orhan. I think there's going to be an ilk that will find that too problematic and will stay out of it. So maybe some of the national leadership would be an example of that. I don't know.
Right.
I think some unions. But I think the Democratic nominee gets the lion's share of just coming out of the gate.
What will your predecessor, my former boss, Michael Bloomberg, do?
I don't know how much more money he wants to spend and be repudiated, with all due respect to him. I'm the first to say he did some very good things as mayor, healthcare and climate, some things I agreed with, and some things I thought were horrible. But stop spending your godforsaken money trying to decide outcomes. I mean, he spent the most of any presidential candidate in history on his own campaign, got nowhere. The money he spent, it's actually interesting, Mark. I think Michael Bloomberg's sudden flooding of money into this election actually hurt Andrew Cuomo, as did the New York Times. We're not endorsing, now we're sort of endorsing, and he's corrupt, but you should vote for him anyway. All of this stuff where the elite seems to reach in and tell people what to do, I actually think backfires in some real ways in this environment, in this anti-institutional change election, pissed off environment.
Right. All right. Really last one. Does Mondami have any positions that are too far to the left for you?
I disagree with him, obviously, on some elements of Israel. I wouldn't say it's necessarily too far to the left. I disagree with him because I do believe there's a need for a Jewish state in a hostile world. He believes in a multicultural Israel. I don't think, for example, on public grocery stores, I think that's actually common sense because we have these massive food deserts that we've never found a solution to. I don't think that's a wild problem. Free buses obviously is happening around the country. No, generally speaking, no. I do not find, and as far as I know, say, oh, there's something that totally shocks me.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we did rent freezes in my administration, so it's not such a impossible thing.
Right. All right. Let's bring in one of our regulars, Cal, who's been reading Brit Hume's Twitter feed, which I confess I've not kept my eye on completely. So, Cal, tell us what Brit has tweeted.
Well, he tweeted. You hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Mayor. How are you?
How you doing?
Very New York. I grew up in South Florida, though I'm from South Carolina. So the how you doing is very, and so hey y'all. Anyway, he reposted what Jennifer Griffin tweeted about the DIA assessment. Apparently she's seen a copy or well-placed sources that DIA assesses the Iran nuclear program could be back online in matters of months, from 1 to 2 months on the low end to less than a year on the high end. You seen that?
Yes, sir.
But the preliminary intelligence assessment is deemed low confidence in intelligence parlance. It's based on satellite images, SIGINT obtained since the strikes, the focus of the port. The U.S. B-2 MOP bunker busters were able to cave the entrances to the facility, which is built 300 feet underground. The entrances are caved in. Some infrastructure is destroyed, according to this assessment, but overall operations were not destroyed, and they could dig out and rebuild and repair the fuses if they could get to it. And then paraphrasing, it says they don't know where the uranium is, but then they reassess that it's very low confidence in this. So
yeah. I mean, again, we've seen this in past issues where the policymakers are making pronouncements, and in the case of this administration, putting spin on it. And the intelligence agencies have these reports. It's clear that the authors of this report, or the owners of it, want everybody to know that President Trump, in their view, based on the current data, is overstating the case. It's clear that there are people who want that to be known. We don't know what the truth is, and they may not be right, and there may be other reports that say otherwise, and we have to be suspicious of all governments. President Trump could ask someone in the government to produce a different report, and that wouldn't be proper. It should be obviously data-driven. Mr. Mayor, thoughts?
Mark Halperin, you may have had your greatest quote of your life. We need to be suspicious of all government reports. I think that's like anywhere in the world.
And media reports.
I said the same thing after 9/11. I said we need to be patriotic, and we need to rally around. Everybody needs to have solidarity, but governments lie during times of crisis. If President Trump is exposed to having overstated the success of this mission, it's more than embarrassing. It's more than embarrassing.
I think, given the way Trump approaches communications and leadership, I'm not sure that's true. I think he's got a certain brilliance to him, and I think the decisiveness. Look, I don't know anyone across the spectrum. Let's start with this. If you're American, you do not like the Iranian government. I'm a left progressive Democrat. I hate the Ayatollahs. Okay, I think they're doing horrible things to their own people. I wish they were gone tomorrow. And I think people on the right feel the same vigor, and we just want the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow them. So for Donald Trump to do, if I'm just trying to be objective, a seemingly decisive, strong act against a government that's hated by pretty much everyone in our country, well, you can understand that politically. Also, I've got to believe it did something to degrade their capacity and throw them off guard.
Yeah.
The nuclear program and their terrorism. That said, I think we've gotten so much reporting that said, guys, there's not going to be regime change, and they spread their nuclear assets out all over the country, and they burrowed things down into mountains. They will, of course, recover. They have massive wealth. They will
And
recover.
uranium mines.
So let's just say the truth.
Can I ask a mayor question?
Not shut down.
Yes, sir. Cal, go ahead.
Quick, so I live in a small town in South Carolina, and we have a mayor, and obviously, our politics is nonpartisan elections. But, I watch the news, and I'm not totally informed on New York, but some of the comments that presumably the potential Democratic nominee, is it Zorhan?
Zorhan, yeah.
Zorhan. Some of the things that I've heard, like about the potential communist grocery store and along that line, how much of that is rhetoric fueled, you feel, or is it placating? It's curious because some of that stuff seems so afar for even a mayor to be the person in charge of on some of these things. I'm curious.
Only two cereal choices in the communist grocery stores, and one you only get only Greek olives. Only Greek olives, Mr. Mayor.
There will be no olive bar. It is one.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor.
Pravda Crunch or something, right? That's one of the cereals, right? Look, I think, first of all, I think he means what he says as a general rule. Again, rent freeze is something we've had for our rent regulated apartments before. Free buses is something that's being used around the country. I don't think these are pie in the sky, and I think he means it. The groceries, I understand your response. I really do. But I got to put you here in New York City and tell you about the places where you could go like, a mile or two and you cannot, and people don't have cars as much. So if you're miles to get to any fresh produce, particularly in, unfortunately, lower income communities, the idea that, well, why shouldn't the government set up a market? People still have to buy, but set up a market so that the fresh fruit and vegetables and all that is in the neighborhood. That's not crazy to me. I think there's been a pretty cynical effort, particularly by Cuomo and his allies, to paint Mamdani as something other than he is. I also think every leader, everyone who goes into executive office has to moderate on some level. Just reality makes you moderate. And I can tell from my conversations with him, he is smart, he is pragmatic, he listens. I think he will stay true to his bigger values, but he has to moderate on some of the day-to-day just to make the city work.
Yeah, Cal, thank you. All right, Mr. Mayor, here's one of your constituents, Barton, who lives here in Gotham City. Barton, welcome in.
Thank you. How are you, Mr. Mayor?
Hey, Barton, how you doing, man?
What happened to your gray hair?
I looked in the mirror. I didn't like it. See, if I had your hair, that's a great color. I don't have that color.
Okay. But anyway, all kidding aside, I looked at Mr. Mandami's proposals, and I'm shocked. I'm shocked that any responsible person could ever vote for him.
Barton, give us one or two specifics of the things that shock you.
He wants to raise the corporate tax from 7.25 to 11.5. He wants to have a surcharge on people earning over $1 million. He wants to have
Barton, I got to say, those two don't seem shocking because there's nothing magical about the current rates. So I just say with respect, like I haven't seen the math on them, but I'm curious why you call those shocking.
Because right now you have a class of earners in the city, and you have a class of people that just want free stuff. And at a certain point, the earners leave. The mayor's laughing. The mayor's approval rating went down at the end of his term.
True.
I really feel that if Mamdani gets elected, there's going to be such a flight. I know so many people that said if this guy wins the election, they're moving to Florida.
Right. Okay. Let the mayor decide, Mr. Mayor.
Let me clarify, Bart. I'm not laughing because I don't take the thing seriously. I'm laughing because of the point that when you said this is shocking and Mark was challenging it, the reason I'm laughing is wealthy people, this is a fact, during the pandemic did extraordinarily well. And they are unquestionably about to get a huge tax break from Donald Trump and the Republican Congress. These are facts. So when you say we're going to marginally increase their taxes to provide childcare, for example, which is one of the things that Zorhan's talking about, I don't think it's unfair. I think it's more than compensated for by the other factors I mentioned. And now, if you say, is there a cultural and political and financial movement of some wealthy New Yorkers to Florida, you are 100% right. And I am concerned about that. But I don't buy that if the people of New York City say, we want this new guy because we think he cares about us more, he's going to do something about it, and we actually think the wealthy could pay more in taxes to help us, I don't believe that's going to be the trigger that's going to lead a huge number of people out who weren't going anyway.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Culturally,
Yeah.
his stance against Israel,
Yeah.
his sort of bringing back all the sort of trans
Yeah.
rights things. Didn't he see the last election results? Do you think the people of this country really feel that way?
I need you both to finish up just because we're over time, but go
Very
ahead.
quick,
I
very quick.
think the
I
point
think
I'm making, I think if he wins this election, it's because if he does get the nomination and you have a split between Cuomo, Adams, and Sliwa, he might squeak through, but I don't really think that represents where New York is. And I hope it doesn't happen, but if he wins, I predict San Francisco on steroids and a disaster in New York.
San Francisco doesn't have the NYPD, and our tradition.
We'll see. I hope I'm wrong.
telling you, I was there, brother, for 8 years.
Yeah.
San Francisco doesn't have the NYPD. The NYPD is going to be effective, right, left, or center mayor.
He wants to have.
Let me finish.
Dude, hold on, Barton.
Just got asked by Mark to finish up, respectfully. But also, he did get the memo, Zorhan did, about what happened in 2024, because overwhelmingly he is talking about affordability. This is like the whole campaign is about kitchen table issues and affordability. If Kamala Harris had talked about those issues as single-mindedly and with such authenticity, she would have won the 2024 election.
Barton, I'll make this prediction. The last 3 people to leave the city will be me, you, and Mayor de Blasio. Everybody else might move to St. Petersburg, but we're staying. Barton, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you. Very grateful to you for coming on, and I look forward to having you back in 2 or 3 weeks when we get the actual results.
Amen. Thanks,
All right,
Mark.
thank you. Good to see you. All right, everybody. In less than 30 minutes now, Stephen A. Smith will join us on Cancer Decoded. Please tune in for that, 7:30 Eastern, on the two-way platform, or watch it on YouTube or on X. But we're super excited to have Stephen A. Smith join us to talk about his experience within his family of dealing with losing a loved one to cancer. So, and as always, you can ask Dr. Patrick anything you want about cancer research, particular cases. So we look forward to seeing you there. Tomorrow, I'll see you at 9 a.m. Eastern Time with Sean and Dan for the morning meeting. And don't forget, tomorrow at noon Eastern Time, the debut of Meghan McCain's interview with Usha Vance. I strongly recommend it to you. It's an extraordinarily revealing conversation about one of the more interesting and up until now unrevealed people in American life. So join Meghan for that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of it. Thanks to our 2 guests. I'll see you at 7:30 Eastern in 27 minutes with Stephen A. Smith to talk cancer. Have a good evening.